Thierry Henry has seen everything. He was at Arsenal when they went an entire season unbeaten. He scored 51 goals for the French national team. He won the World Cup, the Euros, the Champions League. He has watched some of the most gifted players to ever touch a football. Up close, in training, in the moments the cameras never catch. So when Thierry Henry stood behind the glass of a training facility and had to physically stop himself from saying "wow" out loud, that means something. He turned to his assistant and said quietly, "Did you see what he just did?" And then, this boy is on another planet. The player making France's greatest ever goal scorer whisper behind glass wasn't Mbappé, wasn't Zidane, wasn't anyone the machine had decided mattered. It was a 22-year-old who 8 years earlier had been released twice by elite academies before the age of 15. A kid that football's most sophisticated talent identification systems looked at carefully, professionally, repeatedly, and said, "Not good enough." This is the story of what happens when the machine gets it wrong, and what it costs them when they finally realize. Modern football academies are the most sophisticated talent identification systems human beings have ever built for a sport. They don't just watch you play. They measure your sprint speed, your reaction time, your decision making under pressure, your technical ceiling. They compare you against thousands of other children. They project forward not just who you are at 10, at 12, at 14, but who you're likely to become. The big English clubs run these systems with hundreds of staff, millions of pounds, and decades of accumulated data. Arsenal runs one, Chelsea runs one, Manchester City runs one, and between 2009 and 2017, all three of them looked at Michael Olise. All three of them said no. Here's what I want you to understand about that, because it's not as simple as the scouts were wrong. The Chelsea Academy kept him for 7 years. 7. That's not a mistake. That's not missing someone in a 2-week trial. They watched him develop from the age of 9. They had every piece of data they could possibly collect on this kid. Every training session, every youth match, every metric their system could generate. And at 14 years old, after 7 years of observation, Chelsea's machine concluded he's not the one. He moved to Manchester City, another elite system, another evaluation, another year, another decision, not the one. At 15, Michael Olise had been assessed and released by 2 of the 3 richest clubs in England. Most kids don't recover from that. Statistically, most kids don't. The machine is usually right enough, often enough, that being rejected by it is genuinely the end of the road. But Olise did something the machine hadn't factored in. He went somewhere the machine wasn't watching. Reading FC, the Majeski Stadium. The EFL Championship, this is not a romantic destination. It is not glamorous. It is not the kind of place that produces profiles in high-end football magazines. It is a second-tier English football club in a mid-sized town playing in front of moderate crowds, grinding out results against teams the big academies wouldn't even scout. And in July 2018, Michael Olise joined their scholarship program. Think about what that means for a moment. At 14, he'd been released by the most sophisticated talent machines in English football. Now he's 17, joining a championship club's academy, a level of football so far from the elite pathway that most scouts have already stopped paying attention. The door hadn't just closed, it had closed, locked, and everyone had walked away from it. But here's what rating gave him that Chelsea and City couldn't. They gave him the championship. And the championship is not beautiful football. It is not a training ground for genius. It is brutal, physical, relentless, 53 matches a season, playing teams who have nothing to lose against you, managers whose careers depend on every single result. You don't survive the championship with just talent. You survive it with a football brain. And that brain, the one that Thierry Henry would later say sees things differently from other people, had room to grow in a place where nobody was comparing him to academy projections. Nobody was measuring his sprint speed against his expected ceiling. He made his senior debut at 17, came off the bench against Leeds in a 3-0 defeat. He was handed a 3-year contract shortly after. Here's the detail about Olise from those rating days that you won't find in the highlights. His teammate Michael Morrison told a journalist, when he scored goals, he sometimes wouldn't celebrate. We'd be like, Mike, you just scored an important goal and you're just walking back. What's he doing? Then he'd play two-touch with the manager in the gym, win a point, and he'd be shouting and celebrating like he'd won the World Cup. But on a Saturday in front of the home end, he'd score a goal and just stand there. He could never give us an answer. He's just different. Different, that's the word. Not faster, not stronger, not more technically gifted in the way the machines measure technical gifts. Different in the way he sees the game. Different in what he cares about. Different in a way that Reading's championship football, unglamorous, grinding, honest, had room to develop. Crystal Palace signed him in the summer of 2021 for £8 million. £8 million for a player Chelsea and Manchester City had assessed and released. For a player who'd spent 3 years in the Championship at Reading, it felt like a modest bet on modest potential. Then he started playing, and then the injuries started. In 2 seasons at Crystal Palace, Olise dealt with a back injury, multiple foot injuries, thigh injuries, hamstring injuries. He would find form, genuine jaw-dropping form, and then a muscle would pull and weeks would disappear. By the end of the 2023-24 season, he had started just 14 Premier League matches. 14, less than half a season. In those 14 starts, 10 goals, 6 assists. Crystal Palace scored twice as many goals when he was on the pitch. And still, the doubt followed him. Can he stay fit? Is the injury pattern the real story? Is this a player who will always be a nearly man, brilliant in flashes, but never quite reliable enough? Then Chelsea came back, the same club that released him at 14. The same machine that ran its data, made its projection, and decided he wasn't the one. They activated a release clause. The reported fee, £35 million, Olise said no. Crystal Palace played Chelsea Dagger by the Fratellas over a montage of his best moments on their social media. The machine that rejected him had tried to buy him back. He wasn't for sale. Bayern Munich paid €53 million in July 2024. For context, that's the same club that has bought some of the most expensive players in football history. They don't make €53 million bets on players with question marks over their fitness. But Vincent Kompany, their new manager, shaped entirely by Pep Guardiola's football philosophy, didn't see a question mark. He saw the thing Reading had already found, the thing Glasner had already unlocked, the football brain that doesn't need to be the fastest player on the pitch to control what happens on it. And then Bayern did something nobody else had managed to do. They kept him fit. In the most physically demanding football schedule in the world, Bundesliga, Champions League, DFB Pokal, Olise missed 3 games in his entire second season. 2 of them were for yellow card accumulation. The machine hadn't broken him. It had made him stronger. The numbers from 2 seasons at Bayern are almost unreasonable. 27 goals in 66 appearances, back-to-back Bundesliga titles, named Bundesliga Player of the Season for 2025-26, 19 assists in the league alone, leading the entire Bundesliga by 5, and then came June 2026, the World Cup. The hat-trick in the pre-tournament friendly against Northern Ireland, his 7th goal and 18 caps, the assists in the group stage that made defenders look like they were standing still, the bicycle kick against Sweden that nearly took the roof off the stadium, and then the number that puts everything into perspective, 7 assists. In a single World Cup tournament, more than anyone in 56 years, more than Pelé had in 1970. When Thierry Henry, in the middle of a live TV broadcast, said, MVP will always be Kylian because Kylian will hit numbers nobody can, but the most important player is Michael Olise, That sentence contains the whole story. Mbappé is the machine's perfect product, spotted early, developed in the best environment, given every resource, every advantage, every spotlight. Olise is something the machine didn't plan. Here's the thing that nobody says clearly enough. Chelsea was right to release him at 14, not because he wasn't talented. He was obviously talented. They kept him for 7 years. But the system had a template, and at 14, Olise didn't fit the template. He wasn't ready to be what they needed him to be at the pace they needed him to be at. And here's the twist. If Chelsea had kept him, if the machine had accepted him, he goes to the elite environment. He gets the spotlight at 15, 16, 17. He never goes to rating. He never spends 3 years grinding championship football, learning how to win ugly, developing the football brain in an environment where nobody was projecting his ceiling onto him. The rejection was the making of him. The machine that said not good enough created exactly the conditions that made him extraordinary. Reading built the resilience. Crystal Palace built the confidence. The injuries built the hunger. Bayern built the continuity. And Thierry Henry, one of the greatest footballers who ever lived, a man who has watched everything, stood behind glass in a training facility, turned to his assistant and said quietly, "Did you see what he just did?" Football's system is designed to find the best players in the world, but some players are too interesting for the system to understand. Michael Olise is the proof that sometimes, not always, not even often, being rejected by the machine is exactly what the machine needed to do. This is the third man, the stories football almost missed. If this one made you see him differently, subscribe and tell me in the comments, which player do you think the machine gave up on too soon?